The NAIA RISE and MOAA organizations collaborated in this webinar to help athletics administrators learn more on how to recruit and retain international student athletes. Here are the findings from 5 focus groups with NAIA international student athletes conducted across the United States and their common struggles navigating the American intercollegiate environment. Learn more about the needs and challenges of this population and how incorporating easy changes on your campus will result in better adjusted athletes who will do the recruiting for you in their countries.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darnell Smith. I'd like to welcome you all to this fantastic webinar on behalf of MOAA, the Minority Opportunity Athletics Association, as well as the NAIA RISE Committee, which stands for Respect, Inclusivity, Support, and Education. You're in for a great topic. We're going to be talking about recruiting and retaining international student athletes. But before we get there, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Darnell Smith. I'm currently the Director of Athletics at Texas A&M University, San Antonio. And I also serve as on the board for MOAA, as well as chair the Governance and Leadership Academy for the NAIA RISE Committee. And today with our webinar, I want you to understand how these two groups interact with each other. So the NAIA RISE was created based on the diversity, equity, inclusion, pillar from the NAIA. Ideally, the NAIA said, look, we want to focus on how we can put together a strategic approach to addressing the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion within our member institutions. In order to do that, there was programming. There was also a collaboration to be able to put together these ideas to bring them to fruition. One of those outreach opportunities was to partner with MOAA, again, Minority Opportunity Athletics Association. MOAA is an association for anyone. If you believe in advancing the minority initiatives in intercollegiate athletics, if you believe in helping minorities and women be able to advance and find opportunities, careers within intercollegiate athletics, MOAA is the opportunity for that, as well as the NAIA RISE team. They partner together. The NAIA focuses on helping institutions be able to grow. They meet institutions where they are as far as programming, content, ideas. But then MOAA also, on a more granular level, helps individuals, meets individuals where they are as far as personal growth, understanding, any type of programming, enhancements, etc. So the idea for the NAIA RISE and with our webinar today, we want to focus on how we can continue to grow and expand these ideas as it relates to diversity and inclusion within our membership. And again, MOAA is for anyone. It's not just if you're black, white, purple, whatever. MOAA is for everyone, and as well as the NAIA RISE as we look to focus on developing leaders. So with our webinar today, one of the areas when talking with athletic directors, commissioners, all these individuals from across the industry was the voice of the student athletes and the voice of our administrators. And one voice that was not necessarily particularly heard was the voice of international student athletes. On a lot of campuses, we understand that international student athletes or international students may be a big part of your campus makeup, your student body, in some cases 20%, some cases 40%. But when we get to the conversations on how do they feel, or how can you retain them, especially with the changing nature of everything that's going on in the world, and with the changing nature of what's happening in athletics, we want to understand a little bit more about what has their experience been. How can we retain student athletes? How can we support them? How can we build them and continue to create this continuity of leadership? So I'll let I'm just introducing today, but I'll go ahead and let Natalia Hart over at the NAIA. She serves as the moderator for today. I'll let her take it from here, but you're in for a great show. And again, please ask any questions. We have a great panelist here, panelists for our webinar that's going to be able to dive in very deeply, and I think it's going to be a great showing. Natalia?
Thank you, Darnell. Thank you. Hi, everyone. As international myself, I'm so happy to see so many professionals interested in this topic. My name is Natalia. I am the NAIA RISE intern and the graduate assistant of sports information at Park University. And I'm also from Brazil. Before we start, I would like to thank Paige and Darnell for this opportunity. I'm very happy to be here representing all the work that we have been doing for the last 4 months, and I'm excited to share with all of you everything we learned. So today we are going to talk about recruiting and retaining international student athletes. And I have with me Kristen Gillette, the athletics director at Park University, and Sarah Freeman, the associate athletics director at Bushnell University. These two were all in since day one of this project, and they are doing an amazing job with international student athletes on their campuses. Kristen and Sarah, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Great. Thanks, Natalia, and thanks to everyone who has joined us here today. I am the Director of Athletics at Park University in Parkville, Missouri. So we have two campuses, and the other is in Gilbert, Arizona, that has athletics on our campus. I will say in regards to this topic, I knew it was important to Park University through my interview process. When I was being asked, how are you going to help represent the voice of our international student athletes? It was a strong message to me that it's a priority here at Park. And so to be here 2 years later from that interview process to having this discussion, it's an honor to be here today. So thank you.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Freeman coming from Bushnell University. I am our Associate Athletic Director and Senior Women's Leader. I've been working in higher ed and with our student athletes for 17 years, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about our international student athlete population. I appreciate everyone on this call for being here. Our student athletes feel really honored that they got to be a part of this conversation and to lend their voice to what we're doing on a national level. So thank you and good morning from the West Coast.
Thank you, Kristen and Sarah. To start this presentation, I would like to share what one international student athlete said during one focus group that summarizes everything we're going to discuss here today. She said, "We have all come to the US for the American experience. It's a country that has more resources than most of our home countries, but our families have sacrificed a lot for us to be here. So we do feel pressure to perform well academically and athletically. And we are also so far from home. It's not easy, but that's what we want for ourselves and our future." 10% of the NAIA student athletes are international, and this population is growing over the years. Young adults come to the US for better opportunities. Here they have access to quality education, career advancement, and even higher quality of life. It's the American dream, right? But it doesn't mean it's easy. They leave their families, their cultures, their homes to build a new life in a completely new environment. One important thing to realize is that most countries in the world don't have college sports. So after high school, you have to choose if you're going to college or if you're going to be a professional athlete. There's no middle point. In the US, they not only have the opportunity to keep playing the sport they love at a competitive level, but also they can use their talent to pay for their education. That is the real American dream for international student athletes. So knowing that this population is growing and evolving, the NAIA RISE Committee wanted to hear from international student athletes about how the association can better serve them. And to do that, we organized 5 focus groups around the country. We had Bushnell University in Oregon, Rocky Mountain College in Montana, Park University in Missouri, Georgia Gwinnett College in Georgia, and Florida Memorial University in Florida participating. 32 international student athletes joined the conversations. We heard from 9 sports from all seasons and 16 countries from South America, Europe, Africa, and Australia about their experiences here in America as NAIA members. We prepare questions to better understand their journey from the beginning. We talked about recruitment and onboarding processes, resources that are important or resources that they miss, and the cultural challenges they face. You will have access to these questions after this webinar if you want to apply in your campus. From the questions, we were able to identify needs that were common across all focus groups. The language is a pretty obvious one. We know that it's hard to speak another language, but what we learned is that this barrier starts in the recruitment process and extends to all areas of their lives. Even before they leave their countries, they are already struggling to understand all the visa regulations, eligibility rules, scholarship processes, and class enrollment, all in a different language. When they get here, the insecurity about their English affects their academic performance, their relationships with teammates, their confidence to apply for a job, and most importantly, their personal relationships. I'm not myself in English, is what they say, and I couldn't agree more. Sometimes I joke that I'm very smart and funny in Portuguese, but in English, I just feel different. The second need is access to clear and reliable information. As international, you have so many details to worry about, and the student athletes feel like they have to dig deep to get the information they need. And sometimes they didn't even know they needed that information until it was too late. So they miss people who can help them understand things clearly. And materials, resources that start from the beginning, that don't assume previous knowledge, because most of the time they don't have it. The financial situation is also a huge concern for them. Firstly, because all of the bureaucracy that they don't understand. And secondly, because they feel a big pressure to stop depending on their families once they get here. But to do that, they need to make money here. They need to work. And that comes with a lot of challenges. Laws and rules are very limiting, and balancing being an athlete and international student and having a job is a struggle. That brings us to the next need, mental health. Homesickness and stress from all the pressure I mentioned are common to all of them. And it can be especially challenging during finals, holidays, and breaks. That's when they told us they feel lonely, depressed, and like they don't belong here. What can help them get over these tough times is being part of a community. Some of them feel like their teams are their community, and some of them have people from the same country who come together to take care of each other. But most of them still feel like they don't have a safe group to count on. We also put together the biggest cultural challenges they face in America, and it's interesting because they are from very different cultures, but their challenges here are very, very similar. The main one is food. The food that they eat at the school cafeteria or that is offered when they are traveling with teams is usually processed and not healthy. So they really feel like the food impacts their performance as athletes. And even if they want to, it's impossible to follow a diet in these conditions. The lack of public transportation is something that they are surprised about because most countries have buses, trains, or they can really do everything walking. And when they get here and they don't have money to buy a car, they feel stuck in their dorms. They can walk to the supermarket, for example, and that's not normal for them. Some sports also have different rules from what they are used to, and that's not explained to them. They have to find out when they're playing. Currency depreciation is something a lot of them have to deal with. For example, the currency in Brazil, my home country, is 5 times less than the dollar, which means that when my family sends me money, I get 5 times less. If they send me 500 reais, my currency, I'm only getting $100. That's also why they feel so pressured to stop depending on their families. Dollars are expensive out of here. Academic expectations here are different from the educational system they come from. And it's also an unspoken topic. They have to find out how to navigate their classes, assignments, and tests by themselves. Social interactions are cultural behaviors, right? So what's normal for one culture can be very unusual or wrong in another culture. And that's something no one teaches you about. For example, in Brazil, we greet people, even strangers, with hugs and kisses on the cheek. Here, a handshake is more than enough. So international student athletes sometimes have to adapt their behavior to fit the American culture. Lastly, the weather can be challenging for a lot of them. Many have never seen snow in their lives, and now they live in Montana. They know they don't have the right clothes, they get sick more often, and their mental health can be impacted during some seasons like severe winter. With all of that being said, after we learned about their needs and challenges, 2 schools that hosted focus groups were immediately interested in making their campuses better for international student athletes. Please, Sarah and Kristen, tell us about the international population at your schools. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you, Natalia. That was great. I think the thing that's really encouraging is that no matter what location we are from, we're in Eugene, Oregon, you could see in Florida, in Montana, in Missouri, all of the student athletes, they're saying the same thing. So that was really encouraging for us to know that not just we're listening to what our student athletes are saying, our international population, but they're saying the same thing. So the stuff that we're addressing and are talking about are stuff that your international student athletes are also going to be talking about on your campus. Before I go any further, I just want to thank NAIA RISE and MOAA for doing this. And a big shout out to our conference commissioner, the Cascade Collegiate Conference, Rob Cashel, who got us involved at Bushnell and also came and was a part of our session. It spoke volumes to our student athletes. So our population, we are in Eugene, Oregon, and weather is definitely something that came up a lot. We just started getting rain. We have not had any rain. So our student athletes have been here for a month thinking that this is like a lot of other international places, which is beautiful and sunny all the time. And this week it started raining. And so now it's why we get to have the green state that we live in, but our student athletes did not come with rain jackets. And so learning those things and having that is definitely something that we will talk about a lot as we move forward. But between Kristen and Park and what we're going to talk about, it's definitely the tale of 2 schools. We're at very different spots when it comes to our international student population. We share a street with the University of Oregon, our lesser known neighbors. You may have heard of them. They are right across the street from us. And so our student athletes also get resources from that, but we're a small community here, and then we have the large school next door. But our campus, we have about 70% of our traditional undergraduate students are student athletes. 81% of our international students are student athletes. And so on our campus, our international student services are really done by committee. And so we don't have an office that's specific to that. We are still new and growing in our international student population. And the catalyst for some of that growth is because we hired a men's soccer coach who himself was an international student athlete and had experience in that area. So when he came in, he brought the desire to grow that population. And so that has been huge for us, and then has kind of forced the hand, and then allowing us to be a part of this process and do the focus group. We've learned so much. So a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is stuff that is coming from our focus group and coming from the voices of our student athletes and things that we're just starting now to implement. And then Kristen is in a very different place from where we're at. So I like that you guys are going to get the 2 perspectives, and just as a university, you might resonate with where we're at, you might resonate with where Park is at, or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it was fun preparing for this and just seeing the differences in the 2 institutions. And at Park, I came from another institution similar to Bushnell, so it's been wonderful in the sense of having an international department here at Park University that really helps assist the international students through the recruitment and the retainment for their experience. If you'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and we can share some of those numbers. So as you look at this, it is a large population, but I stated earlier that Park helps assist 2 different campuses, again, here in Missouri and one in Arizona. And so our international office has 4 full-time employees and 2 graduate assistants. Our population has somewhat ebbed and flowed over these last 5 years, especially with COVID in the mix of that. And so where we were at anywhere in the 200s, we are now back up into over 500. Also included in these numbers, though, is that our international office helps assist those who have graduated and are going on into the workforce and have their optional practice in training, their OPT. So that number is really up to 600. Athletically, here on the Parkville campus, we have around 75 student athletes amongst our 13 teams. And so I just love seeing all the different countries in which are represented. And I love hearing their stories. And same thing, we have coaches that are from other countries that want to share their culture and just bring their home to us. And so just being able to have those conversations has been awesome in my time here.
Well, recruiting international student athletes is a trending topic among athletics administrators, and one of the main concerns here is how to make the transition into the new country easier for these students. Sarah and Kristen used some insights from the focus groups to create action items to help international students during the recruitment phase. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so when we looked at where our international student athletes are coming from, it's really 3 different places for us. The first being agencies and services. So our coaches will use their pipelines and their connections in different countries, and also just recruiting services that we know. So that's where we're getting a lot of interest from our international student athletes. We also have, when it comes to transfers, they're coming from local community colleges and JCs. And then really, I think our best recruiting tool when it comes to international student athletes is what we'll talk about next is the retention piece and the student athlete experience. So while last year we had 1 men's soccer player from Portugal, this year we have 4. So they're doing the work for us as we are doing the work to provide good experiences and belonging for our student athletes. They are helping with the recruiting process. And so that's been really fun to watch. And then when we did our focus group, we actually had 11 student athletes take part in the focus group, representing 9 different countries, 3 different sports, with both men's and women's soccer represented there, golf and baseball. And we had freshmen through seniors. So we got a really good glimpse of what our student athletes are saying, what they are needing, and what we can do to help that recruiting process. And really what that means is from the beginning until they actually step foot on campus. And so the stuff that we're really talking about implementing now is we are unfolding that right now. We're meeting as a committee to really talk about, okay, what are all the resources that we're putting into this? We are starting meetings with that group. And again, all started from the focus group. And so some of that looks like on our athletic webpage, we have a student athlete portal, and then we also have a recruiting link, which is similar to a lot of what you guys will also see on your own websites. So we want our student athletes, our international students, to know when they're coming in, as they're even just looking at the school, how they can find some of that information, whether it is the weather or how are we going to help them acclimate, not just to our campus, but also to our city and to Oregon and to the United States. So we're going to create a quick facts, a booklet that we can send out to our recruits, but then also that will be on our website. So they can just click into that as they are learning about our institution. And that will have things that Natalia talked about too, whether there's currency in there, there's what to bring, what to expect, transportation options, some simple cultural norms will be in there. And then also holidays was a big thing that came up, and just why are you guys celebrating this? What holidays are you celebrating? So we want to make sure that we compile all of that in one location so that it's easy for our student athletes to access. once we get all of that, I think the next step is then to translate that into a couple of the key languages that we see our international students coming from. Some of them are English speaking countries, but a lot of them are not. So Portuguese, Spanish are some of the main languages that we are seeing with our international student athletes. So being able to provide information in non-English forms is also something that we will be working on doing. And then really just making sure they know who their people are and who their points of contact are going to be is really important. And so for us, they need to know who their admissions contact is, who their person is in athletics. And then also talking about our mental health resources on our campus, every one of our teams has their own mental health counselor. And so when we did the focus group, they talked about that being great and having a team counselor, but also if we had team counselors who had empathies or understanding or experience with international populations would be really helpful. So if that's not their team counselor, maybe one of our team counselors might have that, so we can bring them into that group. And so that is also part of just making sure that they know all of those resources. And then prior to our students coming to campus, so it might be July, it might be in August before fall camp, is having a Zoom meeting to really set the stage for our student athletes. And so they get to see each other, they get to meet each other. It was really, when we did our focus group, was the first time we really had all of our student athletes from different teams in the room. And so our soccer players who were in there, our men's soccer team, they've seen each other, they know each other, but they didn't know the senior baseball player who could have really helped them as they tried to navigate things. So making sure that they see the community and build that community and just start setting the tone for what it's going to look like when they get on campus. And we're looking at potentially doing mentorship programs, and maybe we're pairing a returning international student athlete with a new student athlete. So just making sure that they have a chance for face-to-face communication. It's one thing to make sure that we have the resources out there, but just to go over those resources with them and to get them in the same room and talk to each other so that they feel more comfortable as they're coming. They've made those connections, and once they arrive on campus, they know the faces and they know how to find their people.
Sarah, I'm really glad you mentioned that your best advertisement is your student athletes that are here from those other countries, and explaining their experience to their friends back home. And if you came today to find out how to connect with those recruits internationally, I can't tell you. I know our coaches have amazing contacts with sponsors. All these student athletes have sponsors, and how those coaches make those connections blows my mind. And that's not what I'm presenting on. I'm presenting on once that connection has been made and those student athletes are now interfacing with Park. And what is it? What are we sharing with them? What are our first messages with them administratively? And so on our website, we have the Become a Pirate, our recruiting site, and even our international specific department points all international student athletes back to our athletic page. So I thought we were doing a pretty good job in being able to distinguish, okay, the domestic students, here's your steps, international students, here's your steps. But from the focus group and having Natalia, you say potentially you don't come across smart and funny in English, but let me tell you, you're fantastic and it totally comes across. And we're hearing your message loud and clear. And so following that focus group, we have met with our international department to really try to hone in on even more detail that is easier to understand. So where we see recruitment form, we're going to have step 1, fill out the recruitment form, step 2, apply. And in these little sections, we hope to create small snippets that show the visual of how to go step by step, because again, the language isn't always translatable here at the beginning. And so when they can see it, that's just one more place that we can meet these student athletes. Also for the NAIA institutions that are watching here today, when we send our student athletes through INCRED, again, there can be confusion. We experienced it here this fall as to what specifically we at Park are requiring from that student athlete when they go through INCRED. And so their office has been able to set up that we are requiring the basic high school transcript and that they need a certified copy. Also, if people are transferring from another institution and want that course by course, then we have that note in there as well, just to help minimize confusion on that. So that's, oh, one other thing I did want to mention in regards to, again, our fantastic coaching staff that have these relationships. Some of our apps or forms that we need filled out can't be completed overseas. And so a lot of times our coaches can Zoom with players to get that information early, especially if they're just showing up prior to, you know, practice beginning and school starting. So that is another tip I would provide, is just coaches are really engaged in assisting those students and making them all those needs, right? The Maslow's hierarchy thing of needs of making sure their basics are going to be here, that they're going to feel safe and get to this level of acceptance to where when they arrive, we're hoping they're hitting their full potential. That's what we're after.
Wow, the recruitment and onboarding processes are just the tip of the iceberg. To retain these athletes, keep them motivated and engaged, is important to provide support and resources. And when we think of resources, we often assume it requires a lot of money or time, but that's not always the case. Sarah and Kristen are already implementing simple yet impactful steps to make internationals feel like they belong here.
Yeah, so at Bushnell, that was probably the biggest takeaway for us, is that it does not take a lot of resources or a lot of extra effort. And for us who don't have an international student office, we can do these things and it doesn't take a ton of resources, and it will have a huge impact on our students. Just putting them together in a room in the focus group built the bank account within our international student athletes, and they know now that we are interested in their journeys. We want to hear from them. We want to hear their voice and have them a part of this. And so that's already gone a long way. And our committee is already meeting and talking about our next event, and we're going to do a lunch with our international student athletes. And so for us, that's the next steps, is really creating the group and a structure to keep them together. So just providing space for them to share with each other and talk about their experiences and to connect them and continue to build that community within our community is something that we're excited to do, but then also use that time wisely and to bring in speakers. So the first time we'll really talk about all the government forms. And at this point, we've gone over INCRED and Plan AI and our eligibility stuff, but now really talking about making sure your I-20s are done. And as if you're going home on breaks or not going home, how paperwork needs to be filled out and other things for them, which was really important. When Natalia talked about jobs, a lot of our student athletes are trying to get jobs. And so learning how to find the Social Security office and how to get their Social Security number is so important. And so bringing in a speaker who can help them and show them where that is and how to navigate those tools. And so that will be our first luncheon. And then from there, we will then facilitate ongoing meetings so that this group not only gets to have those educational outcomes, but also gets to just have fun and be themselves and share their culture. And so part of that too for us is we really want to, as a campus, highlight our international student athletes. And that's going to look like special interest stories on our website, or giving them opportunities to promote their cultures through maybe it's food that we will talk about, and they can share what that looks like. Every team can do it a little differently, but we as a department are going to definitely celebrate and make sure that we are talking about different cultures and different food and celebrating and honoring our different student athletes. So that's part of it. Hugely important, as Natalia's talked about, is the food. That was probably the most talked about subject in our entire focus group, was coming to the United States and not realizing that there was processed foods, that they wouldn't get the fresh foods that they're used to, how we eat, when we eat, the portions that we eat. And so we spent a lot of time talking about how do we really both educate them and then also show them how to access their resources locally. And so whether it's you get to shop at all of these different grocery stores, but here's going to be the ones that will probably be the most friendly for what you're looking for and budget. Our student athletes, when they talked about coming to the US, when we talk about what to bring, what not to bring, a lot of them did not bring certain items because they just assumed they could get them here. And there are certain things that they can't get here. Or even when it came to sheets and bedding, they're like, oh, had we known it was more expensive here in the States, we would have just brought it with us. It would have been cheaper to pay for another bag to fly over than it would be to buy all the items here. So really just making sure that we're having those conversations with our student athletes and helping them navigate that day-to-day space, which we do for our traditional students, and for our US domestic students, we take for granted a lot of these conversations that we're now excited to facilitate this group and have those conversations on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that is not on the slide, but I think is really important, probably the other thing that we laughed about the most in the conversation, because it was a funny conversation with our student athletes, but something that we didn't really consider when we are working with our international student athletes. One of them said, I'm leaving the culture I love, I'm leaving the food that I love, the language that I love, and I'm coming to this country to play the sport that I love. But when I get here, the sport is completely different. And so that was something that we was eye-opening for us. And we really got a kick out of the conversations about how different international soccer is to US collegiate soccer. And to listen to our soccer players talk about how silly the game is and that our clock goes the wrong way, we sub differently, it's reffed differently. And so they are really having to learn in a completely new game. So even the thing that they thought that they knew, and that was the one staple for them coming here, is totally different. So making sure that we really educate our student athletes and talk about sport rule, because it's not just soccer. There are other sports that are very different domestically here than they're played internationally. So that was a huge thing for us. So that will be part of our conversations as well, is really talking about sport rule. And just because you got subbed off in the first half doesn't mean you can't come back. And so you can breathe and take a breath. You're going back in the game.
Sarah, I would add on to that. You know, earlier we were talking about the music, and I wanted to play Ole, Ole, Ole. So as soon as you hear Ole, 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 you know you have international students in your presence, because that really is the international theme song in regards to football, right? To soccer. It's even a different name all over the world except for here. And so, and not only is it the sport rule, last year we had this education in regards to the cheers you can do, and way different in regards to what you grow up with. Natalia, am I right? In Brazil, that's just norm, that you are there cheering, and how you cheer is a lot different than how we are expecting it here in America. And so that's been very interesting. But I would say, when anytime it's uncomfortable, dig into it and start those conversations. And for me, it was really important to have conversations with those who were alums from those different countries, and to recognize, like, what is happening here now with these student athletes that I'm not connecting with that experience in what we want from what we're expecting here. And so be comfortable with uncomfortable is what I'm trying to say, I guess, ultimately. When our student athletes, when our international athletes come to Park, it's very welcoming from the campus in regards to what they're going to see. So when they walk into our cafeteria, what we heard in our focus group is they do a lot of cultural dishes regularly, and rice and beans was big, and we have a lot of that. So they were appreciative of that. But you see all the country's flags hanging in that space, and everybody's looking for theirs. And when we bring student athletes around or families, it's a highlight for us to be able to point that out. Our international office provides an orientation that Friday before school begins. And so it's a full day of information. Now, I will say what we have also heard from our international students is that it's a lot of information, all in English. And so it's going to be important for us to be able to provide different specific topics that we addressed in orientation, but we can dig into those deeper separately. And so we are starting those here throughout the year. Again, we hope to record those because our population is so big that we can be able to send those out as references. We in the athletics department really rely a lot on our international department to help with these experiences. So from the moment they get here on campus, we're trying to give them that welcome feeling to when they graduate. They all go through this international sash ceremony where their sashes represent, again, their country. And there's a lot of pride in that event and being able to wear that as they cross the stage. There's international festivals and other smaller events throughout the year that touch on that. I would say athletic department wise, though, we are really trying to capture our own population with our student athletes to have some of those separate events as well. Also, I would encourage you in regards to services, for us, the Pirate Pantry is our food pantry. Because they can't necessarily get off campus, the pantry has different food and essentials that the students need that they just can't run off campus and come back. And it's free, again. A lot of donations that come into that, and it's a huge plus for us. We also partner with different organizations, our Presbyterian Church across the street. There's this ISI ministry that helps with transportation, events, food, and they are reaching out to these students before they get here to campus to be able to help provide some of those services. Another big thing is in regards to those job opportunities. So athletically, as you are trying to find partnerships to help sponsor your athletics department, I would encourage you to ask those partners, do they sponsor international employees? Because that is new in my narrative as I'm going out and working with different partners, because our population is so big and we want to help these student athletes as well. It's awkward to stand up in front of our athletic students and say, okay, for those who are citizens, here's your opportunities, and the other third we've left off. I just don't like it. So that's one of the things we've been able to do. And also then our international department and sponsoring some of that, helping them through that process. Sarah mentioned Social Security office, huge piece in regards to work study and all of that. Also, we've included our international page from our international department that has some really great links on there and their step-by-step process. And if you are not familiar with WhatsApp, that is where those international phone numbers can plug right in. And a lot of teams, it's like GroupMe here in America, but it's the international app that allows those teams to start communicating. From the focus group, though, a couple ways that we have already implemented some things here this year that are new is we have identified a specific staff member who has really gone through the process. A lot of students, athletes are already going to him, and he's just become our international staff designee. And we promote him. So at our all-student athlete meeting, Mateus got up on the stage, welcomed our international students, and really invited them in to help understand where his office is and what he could provide. We did the same thing with our student athletes who speak different languages and really can become mentors. We had an influx of German athletes here this year, and Elias is a fifth-year senior for us on the soccer team, and and so it's been a great connection for these student athletes. And as you can see, I mean, we've got a lot of different languages, and Portuguese and Spanish is different. I didn't know that necessarily, but there's enough in that can create some confusion in regards to their communication. So it was important that we designated both. And then, like Natalia had said, we're reviewing a lot of our materials, and I loved everything that Sarah has laid out. I'm like, oh, great ideas. We need to get in on that. So I think too, the biggest thing is step one is meet with your student athletes, right? This is where you want to just start the conversation, and you got to want to do it. They can read whether or not you're authentic and genuine, and recognize that it's worth their time to be honest, to know that change can happen. All right, Natalia, where are we at?
Yeah, all the ideas that Kristen and Sarah share with us, I think they can be summarized into 3 key takeaways. Listen, learn, and connect. To better recruit and retain international student athletes, it is essential to meet with them, like Kristen just said, to ask about their experiences on your campus and how the athletics department can better serve them. The truth is that most of the time they have the answer for their own problems, and listening to them can be very helpful for your department. Besides that, identifying who can help them on your campus is crucial. That's not just related to documentation, but to mental health, academic success, and physical performance. Who are the people that international students can rely on when they need assistance? Learn who can help and use them as references. Finally, take the first step in creating the community for this population. Connect your students and bring them together, because that way they will be able to help each other. Well, that's all I have. We will have the recording of this session, this presentation, and other resources in naia.org/international, and we are open for questions. We will also love if you could share what you are already implementing on your campus, or if there's anything this presentation has inspired you to do.
Well, Natalia, I jump in. Great job, Kristen. Great job, Sarah. Great job, Natalia. Fantastic webinar here today. Definitely learned a lot. There was one question, Sarah, that came through, and that was regarding the informational packet, the manual that you mentioned. Would you be able to email that or put that on the NAIA resources page for everyone?
As soon as we have it created, we would love to put that on there. That is part of where we're at right now, is making sure that we have all that information in there. And as soon as that gets done, I will absolutely share that.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna ask, there's another question. There's another question in here that says how to get started with JUCO and transfers.
I would say for us, when it comes to our junior college transfers, and actually something I learned this year, because most of our international students had come as freshmen, but now we're getting more and more that are coming in as transfers, is that they also still have to go back and do in-cred. So even if they have years of experience in college, working with an international student right now from Japan, and he's been in college for 3 years and is transferring in, and he's like, why do I have to prove my high school stuff? I've already been in college for years. And so I've been working with in-cred on that. And so that's been eye-opening for us. And the process is they're coming to us similarly as our domestic transfer students. And whether we've played them or they've just seen our programs and filled out our interest forms. And so as soon as we have identified that they're international students on the recruiting process, that's when we start. But it's more of, it's really similar to the regular domestic student as far as how they're just coming into the pipeline, and how our student athletes are finding them. And again, it's word of mouth. We get one student who transferred in and had a good experience, and they are telling their friends, their other student athletes who are international students as well, and sharing that. They're like, oh, this process was good, it went well, here's how they were helpful at Bushnell, you should look at us. And so that's really how we're seeing the growth at the junior college level.
Yeah, and I think from our focus group, we recognize that they're older, right? So once they graduate from their high school system, a lot of them take a gap year and then look to come overseas. And so that was interesting to me as we were going around the room to recognize that they're primarily in their 20s and they're educated, they're driven. So you know, they're sophisticated in that. And so the services that you provide and the jobs are really important as to what's the end goal for them.
I have a question here. How are you educating non-international staff on their role in supporting international athlete development?
How are we educating
Non-international staff.
non-international staff? That's a really good question as well. So I think from the viewpoint of how do we recruit the international population and not being international, finding those coaches that have those relationships. We've had an influx of basketball players here in the last few years that are coming from Serbia, Brazil, different countries. And so our coaches had to lean on other coaches that go through that process. And I think it's what RISE is providing, right? It's the different resources in expanding your knowledge in what you don't know, right? And so being open to different cultures and to understanding that we aren't all the same and respecting that, I think this is a big key in that is how do we start learning?
Next one, how is MOAA encouraging athletic departments to hire international staff to serve this population better? I think Darnell can jump in on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. MOAA helps individuals and meets people where they are, whereas the NAIA RISE helps institutions and meets institutions where they are as far as their development with their membership or with their staff. So with MOAA particularly, it's more on the individual basis. So therefore, if you have members on your staff or if you have members within your organization and those individuals want to develop and enhance their leadership acumen, MOAA is definitely going to be the place to be able to help them there. So if you're looking at trying to advance within the industry or trying to make strategic maneuvers, MOAA provides tools, programs, and or scholarship opportunities and or mentorship or everything to be able to help individuals be able to build those skill sets to get to the level that they're trying to get to make those maneuvers. Whereas the question I would say for career opportunities within NAIA or within other structures, you're going to start at the top. So part of the reach out from the NAIA RISE to MOAA is to say, hey, we want to partner to be able to help individuals build those skill sets. But within the NAIA with the RISE, the focus is to be able to develop those leaders within the industry to be able to position them with the program and with the tools to be able to advance. So MOAA is part of that partnership to encourage all to continue to develop and grow. And they will support those individuals on a granular level to be able to build and continue to reach new heights within their industry. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, thank you, Darnell. Well, I think we are all set. Thank you everyone for coming and participating.
We have one more question that just came through.
Oh,
yeah, Natalia, before we go, we'll get to one more question, then I want to leave everyone with one more thought. Go ahead.
Okay. How do you work around the restrictions of the F1 visa to work for the organizations that the university is sponsoring that visa? I think Kristen talked a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that specifically. I know it's an investment for any company to be willing to sponsor. And so it's having that conversation. The specifics of how that visa works, that's where I turn to my resources in the international department to say, how do we do this? It's probably the best answer I can give right now. I would mention, you know, it's been awesome to be here, and it's interesting how this summer I knew Natalia was going to be starting at the NAIA and the focus was going to be international, and we're in the parking lot and I'm like, we should probably get a focus group together so you are equipped to really understand some broader issues just from beyond Brazil, and how this has grown into where we are today, I think is awesome. Testament to you, Natalia, to the NAIA MOAA, to have this opportunity. And one other nugget that I think was fascinating as we were putting this together is, and Natalia, again, I hope you don't mind that I'm saying this, but she mentioned yesterday that because her first language is not English, the time and preparation for her is twice the time, if not more, than what it is for Sarah and myself in preparing this. She's really got to make that translation to be able to communicate with us. And Natalia, you did a fantastic job, and we're looking forward to seeing what more we can learn from you throughout this year. So good job.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was just going to say that Paige just shared her email on the group, on the chat here, bsalvatierre at naia.org. And we would love if you could share your success cases with us, what you are doing on your campuses for international student athletes, your ideas or things that you are inspired to do after this webinar. We would love to hear from you and share that also on our page and create more resources for other NAIA schools. So please contact us if you have great ideas for international student athletes. Thank you so much for coming, Darnell. Yeah.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And no, thank you, everyone. And just to kind of piggyback off of that, if you do have any ideas or any resources, please get them to Paige, get them on the resources page, because at the end of the day, all this is going to help the person next to you. It's going to help your organization. It's going to help the NAIA. It's going to help those beyond. We want to hear, just like we talked about the international student athlete, you know, that was a question that came up from athletic directors, commissioners, when we started to create these ideas on how can the NAIA RISE really, you know, reach out and have a positive impact on the membership, and what are the stories that we can talk about. And one of the stories that came up, and we were going to get to it, and we're here, is the international student athlete. But it doesn't stop there. We want to hear other ideas. We want to hear directly from you. And also, I'll take this opportunity, if you're not a member of MOAA, I would encourage you to look into it. It's a fantastic opportunity, an organization headed by Stanley Johnson. He's here on the call. He's the executive director and the founder, one of the founders of MOAA. And as well as when you look at just the impact that it can have, not just on your organization, but for you as an individual. So we're all about enhancing and all about making sure we develop others, but also don't forget about developing yourself. And that's where MOAA could come in to be able to help you develop yourself. There's been misconceptions to say, well, hey, you know, I'm not a minority, or I may not be a female. Can I join? Yes. You know, to dispel any of those misnotions, those ideas. MOAA is, again, for everyone: black, white, purple, brown, whatever it may be. If you believe in it. Give a shout out to Cam Trudell. He's our representative from NACTA, who oversees MOAA. Stan, I see that you got your camera there. Did you want to say a few words? You good? Okay. So again, your voice matters. We want to hear your experiences, your stories. So if Paige or I or someone or Natalia reaches out, please share them. And please join the movement and what we're doing from the NAIA RISE. There may be some committee opportunities, but we do have fantastic things coming up in the future, that being the Governance and Leadership Academy. I do see some participants that participated in that. I see Erica, I see Fache on here, to name a few. Couple. I see that Ted Bridenthal is on here too. So we have individuals that are currently on this call that are engaged and doing a lot of great things with the NAIA RISE as well as with MOAA. So if there's any confusion or if there's any questions with that, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer that, or anyone else that's as a member of those committees. So thank you, everyone. Natalia, I kick it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and participating.